From the Weather Channel, a special presentation. From the Johnstown floods to Hurricane Andrew, weather disasters kill hundreds of Americans every year. Blizzards, floods, hurricanes. And with each disaster comes a new respect for the power of nature. A respect that may help us survive the next great weather catastrophes.
It's the worst thing I've ever been through. The noise was just unbelievable, the howling, the banging on the windows, the banging from debris.
It's scary because your heart is racing. You're like, oh my God, you know, you want it to stop already. You're like, please, Lord, stop. And you want it to stop, and it won't. It just goes and it gets stronger and stronger. And when you start to cry, that's it. You let go of the fear. There's nothing else you can do.
Hurricane Andrew killed over 40 people in South Florida. Wind gusts measured at 177 miles per hour. It was a Category 4 storm on the Saffir-Simpson scale, among the worst in American history. And the 200,000 homeless and stricken survivors faced unspeakable devastation.
My neighbors started coming out of their houses, and everyone was like in shock. They were just in total disbelief of the amount of destruction and damage that was done to the neighborhood.
I don't ever want to see anything like that again.
For those who endured Andrew, it had to be the worst hurricane ever for Florida. But history tells us there was one even worse, only 30 miles away. Andrew was a 4 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. This one was a 5. It was the 1935 Labor Day hurricane, the most intense hurricane ever to hit the United States. Hurricane expert John Hope.
As you know, in Andrew, the area of devastation, the width of it was about 30 miles or so wide. And I don't think the Keys hurricane in 1935 was any wider than that, perhaps not even quite as wide. But they were very striking in that they were very small, very powerful, and they formed very rapidly.
The Labor Day disaster began in Washington. In the early 1930s, hundreds of World War I veterans camped in the shadow of the White House to protest Roosevelt's policies towards them.
President Roosevelt ordered the Army and General MacArthur over to destroy their camp and packed them up and sent them to the Florida Keys to build the bridges on the overseas highway. The WPA people had quite an elaborate evacuation, and they already had a contract with the Florida East Coast Railroad to provide a train that would come and pick the veterans up. They had a number of different difficulties, of course, being Labor Day weekend, rounding up a crew. Cumulatively, it delayed the train too long. They got to Matacumbe just as the height of the storm hit.
The hurricane swept the train, the work camps, and the veterans into the sea. Winds of up to 200 miles per hour, a 20-foot storm tide. The storm killed over 400 people and wiped the Middle Keys clean. The Parkers were one of 3 families homesteading on Lower Matacumbe Key in 1935. 4 of them still live on the old homestead land.
The roof and the windows and the doors and everything went at one time, and the water came in. And the house went off of the foundation and started to move. Can't imagine what a feeling that is.
This old barometer went through the 35 hurricane.
Cliff Carpenter was a tourist fishing guide in Tavernier Key in 1935.
12, 13. It never leaves me. It never leaves. I may not talk about it, but it's still in the back of my head, that 35 hurricane.
And like survivors of Hurricane Andrew, Carpenter is haunted most by the terrible aftermath of the storm. No water, no food, no shelter. And worse, bodies were scattered all over the Keys.
One of the burning piles was Snake Creek. That's 5 miles below here. Right at this end of the bridge. Just bring them in then, pile them up, burn them.
Carpenter rode out the storm in the same house in which he and his wife live today. The hip roof, the storm shutters, the sturdy wood construction, and the reinforcing hurricane rods. They may have saved his life.
These rafters, when the wind was over here, the rafters on this side would push in. These over here would push out. And they'd snap and pop and carry on like a rifle, you know. And you just wonder, well, will the next one go? But you know, the old house hung together. It has built in 1930, and it's never had a claim against the insurance company.
But sometime between 1930 and 1992, something happened to construction techniques in South Florida. In fact, when Andrew hit Dade County, it seemed the newer the house, the easier it was for Andrew's winds to rip it apart. Herbert Saffer is the developer of the Saffer-Simpson hurricane scale. He's a construction engineering consultant in Miami and a member of a review board that studied the causes of the incredible damage from Hurricane Andrew.
I think in general, I would not want to fault any particular segment of the population. I think in general, everybody has to take part of the blame. The owner, because his only interest is affordable housing or economical housing. The architectural profession because of complacency. The engineering profession because also of complacency. And the building industry, the builders and the contractors.
Dr. Peter Black of NOAA's Hurricane Research Division in Miami believes, like most experts, that many houses were poorly constructed. They did not adhere to Dade County's strict construction code.
Maybe we can take a look around the corner, but these tie beams essentially were never anchored to the concrete slab anywhere around here. So they're just basically sitting on top of this concrete block wall here. These hurricane straps, they call these kind of rusted steel straps you see going up over the wood frame structure. First of all, they're kind of tucked into the joint of the structure, whereas they should go over a flat piece of the wood frame material. You can see where they're pulling loose. This actually was trying to pull loose from the tie beam here. You might think, you know, they're just details, but all these details add up to catastrophe, really.
The details added up to a $20 billion catastrophe in South Florida, and personal tragedies for which there are no price tags. We can never know for certain what we can count on until a disaster hits. On Dade County's strict building code to ensure a home safety. On a train from Miami to evacuate the veterans in 1935. On an early warning to give us time to escape the storm. A catastrophe like a major hurricane can knock out all our life support systems. It's the ultimate test of our ability to be prepared. The people of Johnstown, Pennsylvania have been devastated by floods 3 times in the last century. Each time they thought they were prepared. Each time the lesson was bitter. On May 31st, 1889, a huge earthen dam gave way above Johnstown, Pennsylvania. 2,200 people died. Many of them were laid to rest here in Grandview Cemetery. Entire families were wiped out. Hundreds of the dead were never identified. They lie in these unmarked graves. The city was devastated in less than 10 minutes. As you approach Johnstown from the north, it's easy to see its vulnerability. The mountains form huge aqueducts that funnel the Little Conemaugh, the Stony Creek River, and the Conemaugh directly through the city. Johnstown's history rests along its rivers. The great Cambria Iron Works, built around 1850, still stands along the banks of the Conemaugh. The stone bridge, built over 100 years ago by the Pennsylvania Railroad, a kind of memorial to the people who died here in 1889. Everywhere you go in Johnstown, there are reminders of the Great Flood.
Well, Johnstown in the 1880s was a wide-open, booming steel town. It was one of the nation's centers in the emerging modern steel industry, and the town was expanding at an unbelievable rate. Population was doubling every 10 years as waves of immigrants poured into Johnstown to get jobs in the mills and mines of the Cambria Iron Company. Johnstown, of course, is a flood-prone community, but what they'd done in the 1870s and 1880s is essentially cut the rivers in half. They would take slag from the iron furnaces, pour it into the rivers, and then build on it. So they'd made land at the expense of the rivers. And as the rivers were narrowed, the frequency of flooding increased.
The South Fork Dam lay 14 miles above Johnstown on the Little Conemaugh. It was owned by the exclusive South Fork Hunting and Fishing Club. Its members, men like Andrew Carnegie and Henry Clay Frick, built boat docks, a clubhouse, and what they called summer cottages along the lake's edge. In Johnstown, it was known as the Bosses Club. This is what's left of the dam today. The club had rebuilt it in 1880, but without any qualified engineer to supervise, they botched the job. The lake behind it was 65 feet deep, 3 miles long, and a mile wide. Memorial Day, 1889. It rained heavily the night before. By morning, 8 inches had fallen at the South Fork Dam, and the rain was still pouring. The water in the reservoir was only 2 feet below the top of the dam, rising at about an inch every 10 minutes. And 14 miles below, Johnstown was already flooding. At 3:15 that afternoon, 20 million tons of water pushed through the dam. In less than an hour, it wiped out a half-dozen small towns, a 75-foot railroad bridge, 24 locomotives, the huge Gautier wire mill, and at 4:10 in the afternoon, it hit Johnstown.
That is when my mother took me in her arms and said, "Carrie, we're going to die." She rushed the 6 of us up to the attic, and in the flash of a second, we felt the flow of water over us, and we landed quickly at the stone bridge.
The stone bridge was at the west side of town. 14 miles of victims and survivors, horses and cattle, locomotives, factories, trees, and houses piled against the arches.
My mother and father being pinned in, the men had to work quickly to get them out. My brother was never taken out. They thought he was crushed, and we're hoping that he lies among the unknown dead in this cemetery.
Officially, 2,207 deaths were documented. Witnesses at the time said the death toll was much higher. They rebuilt Johnstown on that same floodplain. And by the turn of the century, the city was back, and some say better than ever. The snow was still melting in the mountains on St. Patrick's Day of 1936. A heavy rainstorm added to the runoff, and Johnstown was once more a disaster area. The flood in 1936 killed 25 people, and property damage was 4 times the 1889 flood. 15,000 Johnstowners wrote President Roosevelt demanding help to prevent any more floods in Johnstown. He responded generously with a $7 million flood control project. When it was finished, the Corps of Engineers announced, "We believe that the flood troubles of Johnstown are at an end. We salute the flood-free city of Johnstown." The statement stood for 41 years.
Attention, this is the police. All civilians off of the streets in the city of Johnstown. This is an emergency.
The Weather Channel's Ray Bann was a weather forecaster in the Johnstown area in the mid-1970s.
The 77 flood was a pure flash flood. It had its origins solely in the intense amount of rain that fell over an extremely short period of time over a very limited drainage basin. The Conemaugh River Basin itself, very narrow, and because of the mountainous terrain, that rain ran off extremely rapidly and caused the flood.
The failure of another earthen dam caused most of the deaths. 77 people were killed, 8 more missing. Property damage estimates $300 million. The Corps of Engineers would never again declare a city flood-free.
Well, I think the lesson here, among many, is you can always depend on nature to do its worst. That man can mitigate disaster, he can prepare for disaster, but there's no way that you can make some communities totally free from floods or whatever natural disaster that they're prone to. I think Johnstown, after the 1977 flood, is a much safer place to live in. But this whole goal of totally eliminating the threat, the worst that nature can deal, it's impossible.
Some disasters are predicted days in advance. Everyone knows they're coming, and still we're surprised. The superstorm of '93, next.
It's going to go down in the record books. Bet on that.
Meteorologists call it Superstorm 93, an enormous winter storm system that struck 26 states, dumped enough snow to fill the Mississippi River for 40 days, and touched the lives of 50% of the people of the United States. Few of us experienced the true depths of disaster, but most of us got a hint of the overwhelming power of nature.
All the way from Florida through Maine, the intensity of this storm had been indicated well in advance, several days in advance, for example. We started to talk to the emergency managers at the federal level on Tuesday and warning them of the intensity of the storm that was going to happen over the weekend.
But over 230 people lost their lives, the most in any single weather disaster in the U.S. in nearly 20 years. What seemed to be lacking was understanding. Many of us, especially in the South, experienced something we knew little about, the icy lash of a blizzard. Several people were killed in Florida by tornadoes spawned by the storm system, and by a storm surge on the west coast of Florida that surprised everyone.
The rest of the country, most of the deaths were due either to exertion or exposure. And we saw many individual cases of people having heart attacks from shoveling snow. This was a very heavy, wet snow in many areas. Or we saw people leaving their cars, getting caught out, being really unaware of the intensity of the cold and of the wind accompanying these blizzard conditions.
For most of us, the life-threatening paralysis of a blizzard came as a surprise.
When you go for a drive, you know that something may go wrong, so you have a spare tire. You count on the police coming by if you have problems. You think that somebody in your family will come to look for you if you haven't arrived in time. And this storm was so great that it took out all of these safety nets at once, what we call technically a common mode failure. One common cause that took out many of the things that you counted on.
From March 11th to the 14th in 1888, a blizzard very similar to the '93 storm pounded New York and New England. 400 people died, 200 of them in New York City. As in 1993, it was a common mode failure, the failure of those technological safety nets which caused most of the deaths. New Yorkers counted on the new elevated trains to get them to work, on food delivered from out of town to live on. Mary Cable is the author of a book on the blizzard of '88. She lives and writes in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Oh, the elevated had been going only a few years. And that really revolutionized. People could live in the Bronx or Brooklyn and get to work. I mean, they could commute. It was the beginning of commuting. The New Englanders just did as their fathers, grandfathers, and way back had been doing. They stayed in their houses. They had food in the cellar. And the New Yorkers had this thing about getting to work no matter what, and if their transportation wasn't available, they would walk miles, like 10 miles. There was one man who got stuck on a train as it was headed into Manhattan. And there was a long line of stuck trains ahead of his train. So he walked and crawled along the tops of the trains to get to Grand Central. And he did.
But would New Yorkers have been better off not counting on the new transportation modes?
You mean in the blizzard, would they have been better off? Well, yes. But of course, they might not have had a job at all because it would have been a small town.
New York grew in the 1880s thanks to the modern modes of transportation. Then during the blizzard, New Yorkers were surprised when these modern wonders failed. In the 20th century, technology gives us weather warnings which save lives, but we too run a risk when we count too heavily on our technology.
The fact is that we don't always hit the storms as accurately as we did this storm blizzard of '93. But people have to take responsibility for their own actions. They have to be aware of what's going on around them, and they have to be sensible in their actions as they are living with Mother Nature.
And to continue to count on somebody else to warn you, to guide you in those periods of time is basically illogical. Nothing that will come through increased technology is going to be able to replace the personal common sense aspects of knowing the environment and being able to respond to it.
I think we can take this new technology, maybe add it together with some of the savvy from the old pioneers and learn to be a lot smarter about the way we build our structures and the way we react to these storms. So
people took a lot of responsibility on themselves in the height of that hurricane to save themselves. Even as their houses were falling apart, they knew enough to get into interior rooms, to get mattresses piled over their heads, and there were a lot of tales of bravery there in that 2 or 3 hours.
A lot of survival in a major catastrophe is luck, simply luck. Luck, however, can be a surprising commodity. Though it seems based on chance, sometimes we can influence it, make our own luck. We can stop, think, understand, plan, prepare. Those of us who do may not escape the next catastrophe, but we may help ourselves and our families live through it.
Ten months ago, Hurricane Andrew ripped through parts of southern Florida. The storm devastated large areas of Dade County. By storm's end, 59 people were dead. Damage was estimated at over $20 billion, and thousands of people were left homeless. Today, the landscape is still visibly scarred. 180,000 housing units were damaged or destroyed. Damage covers a 30 by 50 mile area. In the aftermath, experts and residents were amazed at how much of the destruction occurred inland away from the coastline.
We have to be very aware that winds in a Category 4 or 5 hurricane can do enormous damage. Over the last several years, and we've been getting people pretty well convinced on the coastline that they need to evacuate, but I don't think we've been able to get the message across to people that they really need to batten down their house if they're going to have a major hurricane.
Andrew was an important test for local emergency management. For the first time in many years, a hurricane affected a heavily populated area.
The biggest lesson learned for this community is how much every individual person needs to have their own plan. Every person, every family, every organization, that personal hurricane planning is absolutely essential so they know where they're going to go, what they're going to take.
65% of homes in Homestead were damaged or destroyed. Residents, after living through Andrew, still had another lesson to learn: the nightmare of bureaucracy and red tape.
Somehow we need to find a way to streamline that process, because the average person can't deal with it. You know, when you're faced with the frustration of building your home, trying to get your lives back together, dealing with the kids, all that, and then on top of that, you've got to go and deal with a federal bureaucracy. It almost gets to the point where some people just walked away.
Many people did just that, but as we shall see tomorrow, many stayed to take on the task of rebuilding their community. I'm Jim Cantori, The Weather Channel.
I need to see your permit.
One of the busiest men in Dade County these days is Freddie Valderam. He works as a building inspector in the heavily damaged neighborhood of Country Walk. Because of the massive amount of damage caused by Andrew, new building codes have been introduced. He keeps an eye on the new construction to make sure it adheres to the new, stricter building codes.
We look for the steel, supposed to be one in every corner. And every 20 feet or less, this way. We'll also look for the footing to be clean. The steel not in contact with the soil.
Well, this house passed the preliminary test. Housing Inspector Valderam also keeps track of all the houses throughout the construction process.
They're also missing bracing and 2 webs. Right here, right here.
Since June 1st, all roofs and shingles have to be able to withstand winds of 110 miles per hour. The requirement before Andrew was 65 miles per hour. Construction is going on all over Dade County. In Homestead, 900 building permits were issued from August 91 to August 92. But since Andrew, 12,000 permits have been issued with a value of $98 million. Not everyone is following the new building guidelines.
I'm telling you what the situation is. There is no permit in this house. The permit has been revoked. You can't work in this house until the qualifier and the engineer comes down to the office and meet with us.
Since the storm, the Building Codes Department has added more inspectors to handle the extra work. Andrew did show weaknesses in construction in South Florida, and as a result, new codes have been introduced for all aspects of all new buildings.
During the storm, we find out that the weakest point were the windows. And when you get that strong wind inside the house, because of the interior pressure, as the window goes, your ceiling will go, and part of the roof will go also.
FEMA has produced a videotape to show residents on how to self-inspect their homes.
Before making any major modifications to your home, though, check with your local building officials.
Everyone, though, is realistic. They realize the new codes will help, but when faced by vicious winds as produced by Andrew, there is a limit to what can be done. I'm Jim Cantori, The Weather Channel. During Hurricane Andrew, many people in South Florida had to evacuate their homes and businesses. A survey completed after Andrew claimed that 70% of the population evacuated from the high-risk areas of Dade and Broward counties. Surprisingly, 44% in Broward County and 28% in Dade County said they did not even know that they were in a mandatory evacuation zone.
It was a very limited study. It had a small sample. I don't consider it valid. We do know that there were areas where people failed to evacuate, and they were areas that we anticipated that kind of a response up front, primarily areas heavily populated by the elderly who are very, very reluctant to evacuate.
After Andrew's course of destruction, there is a heightened awareness of the power of hurricanes. The community is now concerned that the next time too many people will evacuate.
As we talk to people down in South Dade, some people who live inland, well inland away from water, so they're not really in danger of flooding, have told us that they will evacuate in the face of another hurricane. Now, if they do that, we have some concern that it might crowd the roads a whole lot and really overwhelm the whole system.
That's the problem. The infrastructure is not in place to handle a mass exodus. Just look at U.S. Highway 1 on a regular day. During an evacuation, it would become a nightmare. People could be caught in the storm on the highway. The message is not everyone has to evacuate. Only those who are told to do so should. The best plan is to have an appropriate course of action.
One of the biggest challenges is really assuring people that if they take certain precautions and they do certain things, that they're going to be okay.
People who live in hurricane areas should only evacuate when advised to do so. Stay informed. Andrew taught the community that evacuation plans do work, but have to be used in conjunction with some good old common sense. I'm Jim Cantori, the Weather Channel. In the past, storm surge along the immediate coastline has caused the most death and destruction during landfalling hurricanes. But Andrew was different.
One thing we learned was that the winds in a storm like Andrew can cause a lot more damage than we might have thought before. I think we found that the damage from the hurricane wind field can be every bit as great, if not greater than that from the storm surge.
Most of the damage occurred inland, away from the coast. Homestead, Florida City, and Leisure City were devastated. High winds caused destruction along a 30-mile wide path.
I never imagined that wind could do the kind of destruction that it did. If you flew or went over the Homestead Air Force Base and you saw the amount of destruction that was done there, and, you know, that base was built to withstand an attack. And you saw hangars, in essence, open like a can. Airplanes completely turned over. It was just unbelievable.
Andrew's winds were sustained at over 120 miles per hour, and some gusts reached 200 miles per hour in places. Experts are concerned about how much damage could occur if a hurricane hits a larger coastal metropolitan area like the city of Miami.
With an Andrew-type storm hitting right downtown Miami, I think the total damage figures might have gone as high as $40 billion worth of damage.
Well, I'm certainly not a proponent of glass cladding on buildings in the hurricane coast. I think it's an extremely dangerous idea. But those buildings have been constructed over the last 20 years all along the hurricane coast.
Andrew destroyed homes throughout the entire width of the populated area of Dade County. We now know hurricanes threaten more than just those who live on the coastline.
The only thing we can do is to substitute education for experience, and a part of the education certainly is getting the message over to these people to let them know what a major hurricane can do.
A major hurricane can cause mass destruction to property, but as we'll see tomorrow night, it can also leave large emotional scars. I'm Jim Cantori, the Weather Channel. After Andrew, the long task of rebuilding lives and communities started. One of the lessons learned was how to deal with the emotional scars of such a massive natural disaster.
The negative is the wear and tear that it creates on just the human lives. We've seen domestic violence go up. We've seen some of the crime go up. That has now been substantially reduced.
The authorities' major concern was the lasting effects the storm would have on the children. Special counseling sessions and programs have been launched. FEMA has produced a special on hurricane preparedness aimed at elementary school children. The Dade County School Board, in conjunction with WLRN-TV of Miami, is producing a special to teach children about hurricanes. The Weather Channel's John Hope is featured in the program.
That's why the winds get so strong, because the difference in pressure between one place and another.
The focus of our program is to raise the awareness that the children went through Hurricane Andrew as well, and that they are survivors as well as their parents.
Children from Dade County still relive the nightmare of August the 24th, 1992.
It was real scary because like we hear things banging and the windows started breaking, and then the roof started ripping off, and that's when like I thought I was gonna die.
When hurricane season comes, I was like really scared. I'm really scared now because I'm scared another one's gonna come.
The community has to rebuild together, physically and emotionally. Some are doing better than others.
Well, we had heard a lot about children being traumatized, but I think one of the impressions that I got was that a good many of them anyhow had come back very nicely.
That's the task for everyone, to bounce back and carry on. Hurricane season is here again. Those who lived through Andrew will never forget it. But hopefully, the lessons learned from Andrew will help others along the U.S. coastline to be better prepared. One thing is for certain, there will be another hurricane like Andrew somewhere. I'm Jim Cantori, the Weather Channel.